The fluorescent lights in Mercy General's ICU flickered at 5:47 a.m., casting shadows across beds where machines beeped rhythms of life and death. Claudette Morrison pushed her cleaning cart past room 14, where a young mother fought sepsis, past room 16, where an elderly man's lungs struggled against pneumonia. Her rubber-soled shoes made no sound on the linoleum floor she'd mopped 10,000 times. She was invisible. 23 years of night shifts had taught her that much. "Claudette, got a second?" Dr. Patricia Chen stood outside room 18, holding a medication chart, her face creased with exhaustion from a double shift. Claudette set down her mop. "What's wrong? Does this dosage look right to you?" "Mr. Hamilton, the heart failure patient. New resident ordered it, but something feels off." Dr. Chen held out the chart, knowing most people would find it strange to ask a janitor about medication orders. Claudette's eyes scanned the paper. Her finger traced the numbers. "That's 50 milligrams of Lasix, but he's already on 40 from this morning. His potassium levels were borderline low yesterday. I saw it on the board during rounds. You push that much diuretic, his heart could stop." Dr. Chen's face went pale. "Jesus. You're right. How did you—" She stopped herself. She already knew how. Claudette had caught mistakes before. 3 times she'd saved lives nobody knew about, including Dr. Chen's career when a decimal point error nearly killed a diabetic patient last year. "I'll fix it," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Thank you." Claudette nodded and returned to her mop. That's how it worked. She saw everything, knew everything, but remained nothing to most people who walked these halls, just a middle-aged black woman in scrubs pushing dirty water across floors. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Graham, they shut off the heat again. It's cold." Claudette's jaw tightened. The landlord had forgotten to pay the gas bill, 3rd time this winter. She texted back, "Use the space heater in my room. I'll handle it when I get home." Marcus was 14 now, growing fast, eating everything in sight. Her daughter Jessica's boy. Jessica, who died 12 years ago giving birth to him, bleeding out in a hospital 3 miles from here, while Claudette scrubbed blood off an operating room floor, not knowing her own daughter was dying. By the time they called her, it was over. She raised Marcus alone on $32,000 a year. Every penny calculated, bus fare, groceries. Keeping the lights on, his basketball shoes from Goodwill. Her own shoes held together with superglue because new ones cost money better spent on his school supplies. But Marcus was smart, honor roll smart, going somewhere smart. She'd make sure of that, even if her knees gave out and her hands cracked and bled from chemicals that stripped skin like paint thinner. "Code Blue, ICU room 16. Code Blue." Claudette's head snapped up. The elderly pneumonia patient. She'd noticed his breathing pattern changing an hour ago, more labored, the slight blue tinge to his lips. She'd almost said something to the nurse, but stopped herself. Who was she to speak up? Just the cleaning lady. Medical staff rushed past her like she didn't exist. Dr. Chen led the team, calling orders, starting chest compressions. Claudette watched from the corner. Her cart pushed against the wall, making herself smaller. They worked 15 minutes before Dr. Chen called it. Time of death, 5:58 a.m. The man's daughter arrived 10 minutes later, collapsing in the hallway, wailing. Claudette mopped around her grief, invisible even in that moment of raw pain. Her shift ended at 6. She clocked out, rode the elevator down to the basement level where employees parked. Her 2004 Honda Civic waited in the far corner, the cheap spot nobody wanted because the walk was longer. February cold bit through her coat. Detroit winter didn't care about tired bones or empty bank accounts. She dug for her keys, thinking about Marcus shivering in that duplex, about the heating bill she'd have to fight over, about whether the car would start in this cold. That's when she heard it. A scream. Young, terrified. Echoing off concrete walls. "Help! Somebody help! My dad! He's not breathing! Please! Somebody!" Claudette turned toward the sound, her exhausted body suddenly alert. Near the elevator bank, she saw them. A teenage boy in expensive clothes, kneeling beside a man in a tailored suit, collapsed on the ground next to a black Bentley. The boy's eyes found hers across the empty garage. and everything Claudette thought she knew about her life was about to shatter. Reginald Thorne III didn't build a $4.2 billion empire by caring about feelings. He built it by understanding one simple truth. Sentiment was expensive, and expenses killed profit margins. At 6:15 that morning, slumped against cold concrete in a hospital parking garage, his heart failing, Reginald finally understood what expense really meant. But let's go back 3 hours. 3:00 a.m. Reginald sat in his home office in Bloomfield Hills, chest tight, left arm tingling. Not again, not now. The Tokyo merger was 2 weeks away. 12,000 jobs hung in the balance. His 12,000 jobs, his empire, his legacy. He popped 2 pills his Swiss doctor had prescribed, pills that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Pills that weren't FDA approved because he couldn't risk American medical records. Weakness was death in his world. The moment his board smelled blood, they'd circle like sharks. 3 hostile takeover attempts in 5 years. All beaten back because Reginald Thorne was iron. Unbreakable, immortal if the stock price was any measure. He looked at the photo on his desk. Preston at his boarding school graduation last year, standing stiff in his blazer, not smiling. The boy looked like his mother, Reginald's first wife, Catherine, the only woman who'd ever told him no. She'd left when Preston was 3, took nothing in the divorce except her son every other weekend, said she couldn't watch Reginald teach the boy that people were commodities. She died of cancer when Preston was 12. Left the boy to Reginald full-time. Preston was 16 now, sharp as a blade, getting straight A's at Cranbrook. Summer internships at Thorne Industries, learning the business. Learning to be ruthless, though Reginald suspected the boy was too soft still. Too much of his mother in him. The chest pain intensified. Reginald checked his watch. His appointment with Dr. Kaplan, the cardiac specialist, was at 6 a.m. He'd chosen that time deliberately. Hospital nearly empty, staff distracted by shift changes. Side entrance through the parking garage. Nobody would see him. He couldn't let anyone see him weak. "Dad?" Preston appeared in the doorway, hair messy from sleep. "You okay? I heard you up." "Fine, go back to bed." "You're going to the hospital." Not a question. Preston had found the pill bottles last month, confronted Reginald over dinner. They'd fought. Preston had cried. Reginald had reminded him that thorns don't cry, they conquer. But the boy was stubborn, like his mother. "I'm driving you," Preston said. "You have school." "It's winter break and I'm driving you. You look like hell, Dad." Reginald wanted to argue, but another pain shot through his chest. He nodded. They drove in silence through empty Detroit streets. Reginald watched his city pass, factories he'd closed, neighborhoods he'd gutted, people he'd sacrificed on the altar of quarterly earnings. Clarkson Manufacturing, 2010. 400 jobs gone overnight, right before Christmas. His CFO had called it strategically sound, saved $8 million in severance, secured a merger that doubled stock value. Reginald never thought about those 400 people. Until recently. Maybe it was the heart condition. Maybe facing death made a man think about the bodies he'd stepped over, climbing his mountain of money. Maybe he was just getting old. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Preston's voice cut through the silence. "What?" "Do you ever regret any of it? The closures, the layoffs, all those people?" Reginald stared out the window. Honest answer, no. He'd done what needed doing. Built something that mattered, employed thousands, created wealth. That's what capitalism was, creative destruction. Some people got destroyed so others could create. But he looked at his son's face, saw the question really being asked, "Are you proud of who you became?" "Preston, the world doesn't reward softness. I built something that will last generations. Your children's children will—" His heart seized, really seized this time. The pain exploded through his chest like a grenade going off inside his ribcage. His vision blurred. Sounds became distant. "Dad! Dad!" The Bentley swerved. Preston yanked the wheel, pulled into the hospital parking garage. Underground level, near the employee section. Threw the car into park. Reginald tried to speak. Nothing came out. His body wasn't responding. This was it. 68 years old, $4.2 billion, and he was dying in a parking garage like a homeless person. Preston screamed, pulling him from the car. Reginald collapsed onto concrete, cold, everything so cold. He could hear his son crying, begging for help. And Reginald's last conscious thought before darkness took him was this: I built an empire, but I never taught my son how to be a man who deserves to be saved. December 17th, 2010. Gerald Morrison came home at 10:32 a.m. on a Friday, and Claudette knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong because Gerald never came home before 3 p.m. He stood in their kitchen doorway, still wearing his Clarkson manufacturing jacket with his name stitched above the pocket. 22 years he'd worn that jacket. 22 years working the assembly line, building automotive parts that went into every third car on American roads. They locked us out, he said, voice hollow. Showed up this morning, gates chained, security guards. Sign said facility permanently closed, effective immediately. Claudette's hands froze on the dish she'd been washing. What do you mean, closed? Gone, 400 of us standing in the parking lot in the snow. They said we'd get 2 weeks severance, 2 weeks for 22 years. He laughed, but it sounded like choking. Merry Christmas from Thorne Industries. That was the day Gerald Morrison stopped being the man Claudette married. The severance barely covered January's bills. Gerald applied everywhere: Ford, GM, Chrysler suppliers up and down Michigan Avenue. Nobody was hiring. The recession had gutted Detroit. Middle-aged factory workers were dinosaurs in a world that wanted young blood and computer skills. February, Gerald started drinking, just beer at first, couple at night to take the edge off. By March, it was whiskey. By April, he was disappearing for days. Claudette worked double shifts at the hospital, trying to cover the mortgage. Jessica was pregnant then, 19 years old, no husband, scared out of her mind. They needed the house. They needed stability, but stability crumbled faster than Claudette could rebuild it. You don't understand, Gerald told her one night, whiskey drunk, crying at their kitchen table. I was somebody. I built things, real things. Now I'm nothing, 51 years old, and I'm nothing. You're my husband, Jessica's father, that's not nothing. It doesn't pay the mortgage, Claudette. It doesn't put food on the table. What kind of man can't feed his family? She wanted to scream that she was feeding the family, that her mop and bucket were keeping them afloat. But Gerald's pride was already shattered. No point grinding the pieces into dust. The union tried fighting the closure. Lawyers, protests, news coverage. Turned out Thorne Industries had structured everything legally. They'd sold Clarkson's assets to a shell company, moved production to Mexico, pocketed the difference. 400 families destroyed, and it was all perfectly legal. Reginald Thorne III appeared on the news, standing in front of his corporate headquarters. These are difficult but necessary decisions to keep American manufacturing competitive in a global economy. Gerald threw a beer bottle at the TV screen. Glass everywhere. Jessica, 7 months pregnant, crying in her room. That was May 2011. By September, Jessica went into labor, complications. Claudette was at work when they called. By the time she got to the hospital, her daughter had bled out. They saved the baby, Marcus, 6 pounds, 3 ounces, screaming his lungs out. Gerald didn't come to the hospital, didn't meet his grandson. Claudette found him 3 days later passed out drunk in their garage. Our daughter is dead, she told him. He looked at her with eyes that weren't seeing anymore. I know. Everything's dead. Gerald lasted 2 more years. His liver gave out in July 2013. Doctors said it was cirrhosis, acute, nothing they could do. He died on a Tuesday, 60 pounds lighter than his factory days, looking 80 years old at 54. At the funeral, 12 people showed up. Most of the Clarkson guys had scattered, moved away looking for work, or died themselves. Depression, suicide, heart attacks. Factory closures didn't just kill jobs, they killed people, slow and invisible. Claudette buried her husband in a county cemetery because that's what her budget allowed. Marcus was 2 years old, grabbing at her black dress, not understanding why Grandma kept crying. Standing at Gerald's grave, Claudette made herself a promise. She'd never let anyone make her feel invisible again. She'd never forget that corporate decisions had names and faces. Reginald Thorne III had killed her husband as surely as if he'd put a gun to Gerald's head. But she'd survive. For Marcus. For Jessica's memory. For Gerald's ghost. She'd survive, even if it meant working night shifts forever, even if her body broke down, even if nobody ever saw her as anything more than the woman who mopped floors. Now, 15 years later, standing in that parking garage, staring at Reginald Thorne collapsed on concrete while his son screamed for help, every memory came flooding back. And Claudette had to decide, would she save the man who murdered her family? The scream echoed off concrete like a wounded animal trapped underground. Help! Somebody help me! Claudette's exhausted brain registered everything in fragments. Teenage boy, expensive coat, black Bentley with personalized plates, man on the ground not moving. Her nursing instincts kicked in before her conscious mind caught up. She dropped her purse, started running toward them. Preston saw her coming, this tired black woman in scrub pants and a worn winter coat, and something inside him shattered completely. All his boarding school composure, all his carefully constructed Thorne family armor, gone. He was just a terrified kid watching his father die. "Ma'am, please," Preston's voice cracked. "Please, he's not breathing right. I don't know what to do." Claudette reached them, dropped to her knees beside the body. Professional assessment mode, check airway, breathing, circulation. The man's face was grey, lips tinged blue, pulse thready and irregular under her fingers, respiratory rate dangerously shallow. Then she saw his face clearly. Reginald Thorne III, the man who killed Gerald. Time stopped. Everything stopped. 15 years of grief and rage crystallized into this single moment. Gerald's broken face, Jessica bleeding out, Marcus growing up without knowing his mother or grandfather. All of it traced back to this man, this billionaire who'd traded 400 families for profit margins. Her hands froze on his chest. "Please," Preston sobbed, "please don't let him die. He's all I have left. My mum's gone. He's all I have. Please." The boy was on his knees, hands clasped like prayer, tears streaming down his face. 16 years old, same age Jessica had been when she got pregnant with Marcus. A child regardless of the expensive clothes and boarding school education. Claudette looked at Reginald's face. His eyes fluttered open for just a second, unfocused, struggling. He saw her. Some dim recognition flickered there, not of her specifically, but of what she represented. All the people he'd crushed, all the faces he'd never bothered to see. His lips moved, a whisper so faint she almost missed it. I know what I did." Then his eyes rolled back, his body went rigid. Full cardiac arrest. Preston screamed. Claudette had maybe 90 seconds before brain damage started. 2 minutes before death became irreversible. She could walk away. Call 911 from a distance. Say she tried. Nobody would question a janitor who didn't know CPR, who did her best, but couldn't save him. Gerald's voice in her memory. "He made me nothing." Jessica's last words before surgery. "Take care of my baby, Mama." Marcus this morning. Graham, they shut off the heat again. All the suffering, all the pain. She could end it right now. Let Reginald Thorne feel what Gerald felt, the slow, suffocating realization that you're powerless, that nobody's coming to save you, that your life doesn't matter to the people who control your fate. "Ma'am?" Preston's hand touched her shoulder, gentle, pleading. "Please, I'm begging you." Claudette looked at this boy, Reginald's son, but also just a kid who didn't choose his father, didn't choose wealth, didn't choose any of this. A boy who was about to watch his parent die the same way Claudette had watched hers, the same way Marcus would never get to because Jessica died too young. She couldn't become the thing she hated. "Call 911 right now," Claudette barked, her voice sharp and commanding. "Tell them cardiac arrest, parking level B, Mercy General, move." Preston fumbled for his phone, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Claudette tilted Reginald's head back, checked his airway, started chest compressions. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. The rhythm from 1,000 ICU emergencies took over. Her hands remembered even when her heart rebelled. "Breathe, damn you," she muttered. "Don't you die on me, don't you dare." Preston was on the phone, voice breaking as he gave information to the 911 operator. Reginald's chest rose and fell under her compressions, but no spontaneous breathing. She checked his pulse, still thready, still dying. "Where are the paramedics?" Preston cried. "4 floors up, probably. Keep talking to them." Claudette kept pumping. Her arms burned. Sweat ran down her face despite the February cold. "Come on, Thorne. You don't get to escape that easy. You owe too many people answers." 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Preston knelt beside her, holding his father's hand, crying silently now. "Dad, please, please don't leave me alone." And something cracked in Claudette's chest that had nothing to do with Reginald Thorne's ribs under her palms. She was saving this man's life, the man who destroyed hers. And she didn't know if that made her a saint or a fool. 3 minutes into CPR, Claudette's arms screamed in protest, but her hands never stopped their rhythm on Reginald Thorne's chest. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Her mind, though, her mind was at war with itself. Every compression pushed blood through the heart of the man who'd destroyed Gerald. Every breath she forced into his lungs gave life to the billionaire who'd taken everything from her family. Her rational brain understood she was doing the right thing. Her wounded heart wanted to stop, to watch him slip away, to finally balance the scales. "Is he breathing?" Preston's voice shattered her thoughts. "Why isn't he breathing on his own?" "His heart's in arrhythmia," Claudette said between compressions. "Electrical signals misfiring. I'm keeping blood flowing manually until paramedics get here with a defibrillator." She didn't tell the boy that his father might already be too far gone. That brain cells were dying by the thousands every second. That even if they revived him, he might wake up a vegetable, unable to speak, unable to think, unable to recognize his own son. Part of her, the dark, wounded part, thought that might be justice. Let Reginald Thorne live as a shell, dependent on others for every basic need. Let him feel powerless every single day for whatever time he had left. Then she looked at Preston's face, streaked with tears, and hated herself for thinking it. "Tell me about him," Claudette said suddenly, needing to hear something, anything to keep pushing. "Your dad. What's he like?" Preston's eyes went wide. "What? Talk to me. Keep talking. Tell me who he is." Preston's mouth worked, struggling. He's hard, demands perfection. "I got a 96 on my calculus midterm last month, and he asked why it wasn't 100. The boy's voice cracked. "But he came to every one of my basketball games when I was 12, even though I was terrible. Sat in the stands with his phone off. Never missed one. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. He bought my mom's favorite flowers every year on her birthday, even after she died. Puts them on her grave himself, won't let anyone else do it." Preston was sobbing now, words tumbling out. "He's terrible at showing feelings. Never says he loves me. But he taught me to tie a tie, to drive stick shift, to negotiate. He's my dad. He's all I have." Claudette felt Reginald's ribs flex under her palms, felt his body, this fragile, failing human body, fighting for survival. This wasn't Reginald Thorne III, corporate titan. This was just a man. A father, someone's son once, someone's husband, someone who existed beyond the newspaper headlines and factory closures. But Gerald had been someone's husband too, someone's father, someone who existed beyond unemployment statistics and casualty numbers in economic reports. Where was the mercy for him? "Mom?" Preston's hand touched her arm. "You're crying." She was, tears streaming down her face, dripping onto Reginald's expensive suit jacket. Her arms were giving out, 52 years old, working all night, and now this. She couldn't keep going much longer. "I can't feel a pulse anymore," Preston whispered. "Is he?" "No." Claudette pressed harder, faster. "He's not dead until I say he's dead." Why? Why was she fighting so hard? This man owed her nothing, owed Gerald everything. She should let him go, let nature take its course, walk away clean. But she couldn't. Because if she let Reginald die when she had the power to save him, she'd become exactly what she accused him of being. Someone who looked at human life and calculated its worth based on personal benefit. Someone who decided who deserved to live and who deserved to die. Gerald would hate what she was doing right now. Gerald would want Reginald to suffer. But Gerald was dead, and Marcus was alive, and Marcus needed a grandmother who could look him in the eye and tell him that mercy matters more than revenge, that choosing to be better than your worst impulses is what separates humans from monsters. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Claudette felt something shift under her hands, a cough. Reginald's body convulsed, and suddenly he was breathing, shallow, gasping, but breathing on his own. "Dad!" Preston grabbed his father's hand. "Dad, can you hear me?" Reginald's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, confused, but alive. He looked directly at Claudette, and this time there was full recognition in his gaze. He knew who she was. She could see it. The understanding, the shock, the question, "Why did you save me?" Paramedics burst through the stairwell door, equipment clanging. Claudette stood up, her knees nearly buckling, and stepped back as the professionals took over. Her part was done. She'd saved Reginald Thorne's life, and nothing would ever be the same. Claudette sat in the emergency room waiting area at 7:43 a.m., still wearing her work scrubs, wanting nothing more than to go home to Marcus and pretend the last hour never happened. But Preston Thorne wouldn't let her leave. The boy sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, gripping her hand like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just collapsed. His expensive coat was stained with his father's blood. His designer sneakers scuffed and dirty from kneeling on concrete. He looked like what he was, a terrified kid. "They said it'll be at least 3 hours, Preston said for the 4th time. "Emergency cardiac surgery. They have to, I don't know, fix something." I didn't understand all the medical words. "Coronary artery bypass," Claudette said quietly. "They're rerouting blood flow around blocked arteries. It's serious, but if they caught it in time, he'll survive." "Because of you," Preston's voice cracked. "The paramedic said if you hadn't done CPR, he'd be dead. Brain damage in 4 minutes, death in 6. You kept him alive for almost 8 minutes. Claudette didn't respond. Her arms still ached, her back screamed. She wanted coffee, sleep, and about 15 years to process what she'd just done. The waiting room TV flickered in the corner, morning news playing softly. Claudette wasn't paying attention until she heard the name. Breaking news: billionaire industrialist Reginald Thorne III was rushed to Mercy General Hospital early this morning after suffering cardiac arrest. Sources say a hospital employee performed life-saving CPR in the parking garage until paramedics arrived. We'll have more as this story develops. Preston's head snapped toward the screen. "How do they already know?" "Somebody always talks," Claudette muttered. Hospital gossip traveled faster than medicine through an IV. By now, half the staff knew the janitor had saved Reginald Thorne's life. By noon, the whole city would know. She stood up. "I need to go home." "Please don't." Preston grabbed her arm. "Please, I don't have anyone else here. Dad's assistant is flying in from New York. The lawyers are coming, but right now it's just me, and I don't want to be alone." Claudette looked at this boy, this rich, privileged boy who should have nothing in common with her, and saw Marcus, saw every scared kid who ever needed someone to just stay. She sat back down. "Thank you," Preston whispered. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. Graham, where are you? You're always home by now." She texted back. "Something came up at work. Be home soon. There's cereal and milk." "Marcus. The heat's still off?" Claudette closed her eyes. The heat. Right. She'd have to fight with the landlord, probably pay a late fee she couldn't afford, all while running on no sleep and emotional exhaustion that felt like drowning. "Mom?" Preston was staring at her phone. "Is everything okay?" "Fine. You look worried." "I'm always worried. That's what broke people do. We worry about heat and groceries and whether the car will start. You wouldn't understand." It came out harsher than she meant. Preston flinched but didn't let go of her hand. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't understand. But I want to. And I want to help. Whatever you need. Money, anything. My father owes you everything." "Your father owes me nothing," Claudette said flatly. "I didn't save him for a reward. I saved him because it was the right thing to do, even when everything in me wanted to walk away." Preston's eyes went wide. "What do you mean?" Claudette realized her mistake too late. She'd said too much. The exhaustion had loosened her tongue. Before she could answer, the waiting room doors burst open. 3 people in business suits, 2 carrying briefcases, 1 with a tablet. Behind them, a woman with a camera. Preston Thorne, the lead suit, a woman in her 40s, approached. "I'm Rebecca Cross, your father's chief legal counsel. We need to discuss the situation." The woman with the camera raised it, snapping photos. "Is this the woman who saved Mr. Thorne? Ma'am, can I get your name?" No comment. Claudette stood, pulling away from Preston. "Wait," Preston jumped up. "Her name is—" "Don't," Claudette cut him off. "Don't give them my name. Don't make this into something it's not." But it was too late. The story was already spinning out of control, and Claudette Morrison, invisible for 23 years, was about to become very, very visible, whether she wanted it or not. 3 days after emergency surgery, Reginald Thorne asked to see the woman who saved his life. Claudette stood outside his private hospital suite, room 847, staring at the door like it might bite. She'd avoided him successfully for 72 hours, dodging Preston's calls, ignoring the lawyer's messages, telling hospital administration she had nothing to say. But this morning, Preston had shown up at her duplex at 6 a.m., begging. "He knows who you are," Preston had said, standing on her porch in the freezing cold. "He remembers, and he needs to talk to you. Please." Now she was here, and every instinct screamed to run. She pushed open the door. Reginald sat propped up in bed, looking 20 years older than his 68. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped steady rhythms. His face was grey, hollow, but his eyes were sharp, clear, and locked on her the moment she entered. "You're Gerald Morrison's wife," he said. Not a question, a statement. Claudette's hand tightened on her purse strap. "Widow. Clarkson Manufacturing, December 2010. I closed the factory 3 days before Christmas." His voice was raspy from the breathing tube they'd removed yesterday. 400 employees. Your husband was one of them." "You remember?" Claudette's voice dripped with bitterness. "How nice. Most billionaires don't bother remembering the people they destroy. I remember because my CFO called it our Christmas miracle. Saved $8 million in severance by timing the closure before year-end bonuses kicked in. We secured the Pinnacle merger. Stock jumped 14%. I made $300 million personally that quarter." Reginald coughed, wincing. "I remember because it was brilliant business. Ruthless, efficient, profitable." "My husband drank himself to death," Claudette said flatly. "Took him 3 years, liver failure. He was 54 years old." Reginald's face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not. You're sorry you almost died. You're sorry you got caught being mortal. But you're not sorry about Gerald, or the other 399 people you threw away like trash." "You're right." The admission shocked her into silence. "I'm not sorry," Reginald continued, his voice gaining strength. "Not the way you want me to be. I can't feel what you feel. I've spent 40 years training myself not to. Sentiment is weakness in my world. Every factory closure, every layoff, every pension fund I raided, I did it because the numbers justified it, because shareholders demanded growth, because that's how you build an empire." "An empire built on corpses," Claudette shot back. "Yes." He met her eyes directly. "Gerald Morrison's corpse, and hundreds of others. I knew what I was doing. I just never had to look at the faces." Claudette moved closer to his bed, her voice shaking with rage. "My daughter died giving birth because the stress of losing our house sent her into early labor. My grandson grew up without a mother because you decided $8 million was more important than 400 families. You didn't just kill my husband, Mr. Thorne, you killed my entire family's future." Reginald's jaw clenched. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "Why did you save me?" "Because your son was begging me to, and he didn't deserve to watch you die." "But I deserved to die." "Probably. But that wasn't my decision to make." Claudette's voice cracked. "You want to know the real reason? I saved you because if I'd let you die, I would have become you, someone who looks at human life and decides what it's worth based on personal gain, someone who chooses dollars over dignity." Reginald flinched like she'd slapped him. That's the difference between us, Claudette continued. I've been invisible my whole life, worked jobs nobody respects, raised kids alone, scraped by on nothing. But I see people. Every single person matters to me, even the ones who destroyed my life. You've been visible your whole life. Newspapers, magazines, board meetings. But you don't see anybody. Just numbers on spreadsheets. Just obstacles or opportunities. You're right, Reginald said quietly. I don't want your money, Claudette said. I don't want your apologies. I want you to understand that Gerald Morrison mattered. That his life had value beyond his productivity. That when you closed that factory, you didn't just adjust labor costs. You murdered futures. Reginald's hand trembled as he reached for the water cup on his bedside table. What do you want from me? Claudette turned to leave, then stopped at the door. I want you to change. Not because you almost died, not because you feel guilty, but because it's right. Give people back their dignity. That's what you owe. Not me, but everyone you've ever stepped on climbing your mountain of money. She walked out, leaving Reginald Thorne alone with the weight of 400 ghosts and one impossible question. Could a man who'd spent a lifetime being ruthless learn to be human? The check sat on Claudette's kitchen table like a live grenade. $500,000, signed by Reginald Thorne III, delivered by messenger 2 days after their hospital confrontation. Marcus stood staring at it, his 14-year-old mouth hanging open. Graham, that's $500,000. We could fix everything. The heat. The car. College for me. Everything. We're sending it back, Claudette said, pouring herself coffee with hands that shook slightly. What? Why? Because it's guilt money. He thinks he can write a check and erase what he did. She sat down heavily. Money doesn't fix everything, baby. Sometimes it just makes the problem look different. Her phone rang. Preston. He'd been calling every day since the incident. Mrs. Morrison, please don't hang up, Preston said the moment she answered. Just hear me out. Your father's check is going back. I know, that's not why I'm calling. Preston's voice sounded different. Less polished boarding school kid, more genuine. Can I come over? I want to meet Marcus. And I want to talk to you about something that's not about money. Claudette's instinct was to say no. But something in his voice made her pause. Fine, 1 hour. That's it. Preston showed up 30 minutes later in jeans and a regular coat, driving a Toyota instead of the Bentley. He brought pizza. Not expensive, just regular pizza from the chain place on Jefferson Avenue. Marcus answered the door, sized up the white kid on his porch, and turned skeptical. You're the billionaire's son. Yeah, you're Marcus. Your grandmother saved my dad's life. Preston held up the pizza. Can I come in? They sat at the small kitchen table, 3 people from completely different worlds, eating pepperoni pizza while the space heater hummed in the corner. This place is freezing, Preston said, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, I didn't mean… It's fine, Marcus said. Landlord's garbage. We're used to it. Preston looked around the duplex. The patched walls, the old furniture, the water stain on the ceiling. His face went through several emotions Claudette couldn't quite read. My dad wants to set up an education fund for Marcus, Preston said finally. Full ride to any college, including room and board, living expenses. No strings attached. No, Claudette said immediately. Graham. Marcus's voice cracked. That's my future. It's charity, Claudette shot back. It's him trying to buy his way out of guilt. Maybe, Preston admitted. But does that matter? Marcus still gets to go to college. He still gets opportunities. Why should he suffer because of what my father did to your husband? The logic was sound, which made Claudette hate it more. Because accepting handouts from the man who destroyed our family makes us complicit, Claudette said. It says we're okay with what he did, as long as we get paid. I'm not okay with what he did, Preston said quietly. I've spent the last week reading about Clarkson Manufacturing, about all the closures. My father has destroyed thousands of lives, and I'm supposed to inherit that empire and keep doing it. I don't want that. Marcus leaned forward. So what do you want? I want to change it, but I'm 16. I don't have power yet. My dad does, and he's listening for the first time in his life because he almost died, and the woman who saved him told him he's built his success on corpses. Preston looked at Claudette. He's trying. Not enough, maybe not the right way, but he's trying. And shutting him down completely just makes him go back to being who he was. Claudette wanted to argue, but the kid had a point. Marcus, Preston turned to him, what do you want to be? Doctor, Marcus answered immediately. Like an ER doctor, saving people. That's expensive, really expensive. Medical school, residency, you're looking at 12 years of education minimum. You need help. We'll figure it out, Claudette said, but her voice lacked conviction. She'd done the math 100 times. Even with scholarships, medical school was impossible on her salary. Or you could accept help from someone who owes your family everything, Preston pressed. Not as charity, as restitution, as payment for a debt that can never actually be repaid. Marcus looked at his grandmother, hope and desperation warring on his face. Gram, please. I don't want to end up working minimum wage my whole life because we're too proud to accept help. The words hit Claudette like a punch. Was that what she was teaching him? That pride mattered more than opportunity. I need to think about it, she said finally. Preston nodded, stood up. That's fair, but Mrs. Morrison, my father's going to keep trying. And honestly, I think you're the only person who's ever made him actually feel something. That's worth more than money. After Preston left, Marcus turned to his grandmother. What are you going to do? Claudette stared at the check still sitting on the table. I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know. The headline hit the Detroit Free Press website at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning, and by noon, Reginald Thorne's billion-dollar empire was burning. The Thorne in Detroit side, how one billionaire built his fortune on working-class suffering. By Sarah Chen, investigative reporter Claudette saw it on her phone during her break at the hospital. She read the first paragraph and felt her stomach drop. Reginald Thorne III, the billionaire recently saved from cardiac arrest by hospital janitor Claudette Morrison, has a 40-year history of systematically destroying working-class communities across 6 states. A 6-month investigation reveals a pattern of factory closures, pension fund raids, and strategic bankruptcies that left thousands of families destitute while Thorne accumulated a personal fortune of $4.2 billion. The article was devastating, methodical, brutal in its detail. Sarah Chen had done her homework. She'd tracked down former Clarkson manufacturing employees, the ones who'd survived anyway. Jerry Patterson, who'd lost his house and lived in his car for 2 years. Monica Hughes, whose husband killed himself 3 months after the closure. David Chen, Sarah's own uncle, who'd worked at Clarkson for 30 years and now bagged groceries at 62 years old. The article included spreadsheets, financial documents, internal memos. One memo dated December 14, 2010, made Claudette's blood run cold. Recommend immediate closure of Clarkson facility before year end. Timing eliminates holiday bonus obligations 2.1 melama and allows severance payout at reduced rate due to emergency clause. Projected savings 8.3 matters. Employee impact minimal concern. Saturated labor market provides replacement workers at 30% reduced cost. Gerald Morrison's life had been calculated down to a line item, minimal concern. By 9 a.m., the story had gone national. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, every outlet picked it up. The narrative was perfect. Billionaire saved by the widow of a man he'd destroyed. The irony was too good to ignore. Claudette's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, talk shows. People magazine wanted an exclusive. Someone offered her $50,000 for an interview. She ignored them all and went to work, but the world wouldn't let her hide. At 2 p.m., protesters gathered outside Thorne Industries headquarters in downtown Detroit. By 4 p.m., there were 300 people. By 6 p.m., the crowd had swelled to over 1,000. Former employees, union organizers, community activists, people holding signs with names of closed factories, Clarkson Manufacturing, Henderson Automotive, Riverside Plastics, Millbrook Steel. One sign read, Gerald Morrison mattered. Claudette saw it on the news and started crying. Marcus found her in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, staring at her phone. Graham, what's wrong? She showed him the sign. They remember him, she whispered. All these years I thought Gerald died invisible. But people remember. Her phone rang again. This time it was Preston, and his voice was panicked. Mrs. Morrison, have you seen the news? It's everywhere. They're saying my father is a monster. They're calling for boycotts. The stock price dropped 18%. The board is meeting tomorrow, and they're talking about forcing him out. Good, Claudette said coldly. You don't understand. If they force him out, nothing changes. They'll just put someone else in charge who does the exact same things. But quieter. My father was ready to make real changes. This is destroying any chance of that. Maybe he should have thought about that before he spent 40 years destroying people. Please, Preston's voice cracked. Come to the house. Talk to him. He's falling apart. The stress is going to kill him. The doctors said any major stress could trigger another heart attack. That's not my problem. Yes, it is, Preston shouted, then caught himself. I'm sorry. But you saved his life. You told him to change. He was going to change. And now the world is burning him alive before he gets the chance. Claudette closed her eyes. This wasn't her responsibility. She'd done her part. She'd saved his life, told him the truth, walked away. What happened next wasn't her concern, but then she thought about the sign. Gerald Morrison mattered. The protesters weren't wrong. Reginald Thorne deserved every bit of rage being thrown at him. But public execution without the possibility of redemption, was that justice? Or was it just revenge dressed up in righteous anger? I'll come, she said finally, but I'm not making any promises. She arrived at the Thorne estate in Bloomfield Hills at 8 p.m. The house was massive, 12,000 square feet of glass and stone, worth maybe $8 million. Guards at the gate checked her ID. Preston met her at the door, looking exhausted. Thank you for coming. Where is he? His study, but Mrs. Morrison, you should know. The reporter, Sarah Chen, she's coming here tomorrow morning. She wants to interview both of you together. The woman who saved the billionaire and the billionaire she saved. It'll be broadcast live on national television. Claudette's stomach dropped. What did you tell her? I said I'd ask. She said if you both agree to the interview, she'll give you a platform to tell the full story. Not just what my father did wrong, but what happens next. Whether people can actually change, or if we just destroy them and move on. Claudette stared at this boy, this earnest, desperate 16-year-old who was trying to save his father's soul while the world demanded his head. Let me talk to him first, she said. Okay, but Mrs. Morrison, whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for giving him a chance to be better than he was. Claudette walked toward the study, toward the man who'd killed her husband, and wondered if redemption was actually possible. Or if some sins were simply too big to forgive. Reginald Thorne sat behind his mahogany desk in his home study, watching his empire collapse in real time on 6 different screens. Stock ticker down 23% and falling. Newscrawler, Thorne Industries Board calls emergency meeting. Email from his CFO, we need to talk, now. Text from his lead counsel, they're moving to invoke the health clause. You need to fight this. Claudette stood in the doorway, watching this man, this billionaire titan, look smaller than he had in the hospital bed. He'd lost weight. His skin had a grey pallor. His hands trembled as he typed furiously on his keyboard. They're taking it, he said without looking up. 40 years building this company, and they're taking it in 48 hours. Maybe you should let them, Claudette said. Reginald's head snapped up. What? You heard me. Maybe losing everything is exactly what you need. He laughed bitterly. You came all the way here to watch me burn? No, I came because Preston begged me to, but now that I'm here, I'm wondering if everyone's got this backwards. Claudette moved into the room, sat down in the leather chair across from his desk, uninvited. You built this empire on fear and ruthlessness. Now that people smell weakness, they're doing to you exactly what you taught them to do. Take everything they can while you're vulnerable. That's different. I built this company from your father's automotive parts factory that he inherited from his father, Claudette interrupted. Don't rewrite history. You were born on third base and spent your life telling everyone you hit a triple. Reginald's jaw clenched. My grandfather started with nothing. And your father expanded it, and you turned it into a weapon that destroyed communities. The how doesn't matter when the result is thousands of ruined lives. Then why are you here? Reginald's voice rose. To lecture me while I lose everything? To gloat? I'm here because I need to understand something. Claudette leaned forward. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. They're going to vote you out using the health disclosure clause, the fact that you hid your heart condition from shareholders. They'll install Richard Kemper as interim CEO, and he'll gut everything you built to squeeze out maximum profit before selling to a private equity firm. I read the news too. Reginald nodded slowly. Kemper's been positioning for this for 2 years. He's got 6 board members in his pocket. I've got 3, maybe 4 loyal votes. I lose tomorrow and everything changes. So fight back. With what? My health is public knowledge now. The stock price is in free fall. Every reporter in America is calling me a monster. My own son looks at me like he doesn't know who I am. Reginald's voice cracked. I have no weapons left. You have the truth, Claudette said. You have the choice to go into that board meeting and do something nobody expects. Tell them exactly what you did, why it was wrong, and what you're going to do differently. They'll destroy me. They're already destroying you, but at least this way, you control the narrative. You show them that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the beginning of actual strength. Reginald stared at her like she'd lost her mind. That's not how business works. No, it's not. That's how humanity works. And you stopped being human a long time ago. Claudette stood up. Tomorrow morning, you have a choice. You can walk into that boardroom and fight to keep power using the same ruthless tactics that got you here. Threaten people, call in favors, play dirty. Maybe you win, maybe you lose, but either way, nothing actually changes. Or you walk in there and show them who you could be instead of who you've been. Admit what you did. Propose real changes, worker protections, profit sharing, community investment. Give them a vision of what Thorne Industries could mean if it actually cared about people instead of just quarterly earnings. They'll vote me out immediately, Reginald said. Shareholders want profits, not moral philosophy. Probably, but you'll still have your soul. And Preston will have a father he can respect. Claudette moved toward the door. The question is, what do you actually want? Power or redemption? Can't I have both? No, that's the point. You can keep fighting to maintain control using fear, or you can risk everything to become someone worth following. But you can't do both. Reginald's phone buzzed. Another email, another crisis, another piece of his empire cracking. The reporter, Sarah Chen, she wants to interview us both tomorrow morning before the board meeting, he said. Live television, millions of viewers. If I go on there and admit everything, show weakness, I'll lose what little leverage I have left. Yes, Claudette agreed, you will. So why would I do it? Because Gerald Morrison deserves to hear you say it. Because 400 Clarkson families deserve acknowledgement. Because your son deserves a father who chooses truth over power. Claudette paused at the door. And because the man I saved in that parking garage isn't worth saving if he just goes back to being the monster who destroyed my family. She left him sitting there, surrounded by screens showing his empire burning, forced to decide who he wanted to be when everything else was stripped away. Preston found her in the hallway. What did he say? Nothing yet, but tomorrow morning we're all going to find out if people can actually change or if we're all just prisoners of who we've always been. At 11:47 p.m., Claudette's phone buzzed with a text from Reginald Thorne. I'll do the interview, all of it. No lawyers, no scripts. Just truth. God help me. She stared at the message for a long time before responding. God help us all. The television studio felt like a gladiator arena. Bright lights, 3 cameras, and an audience of 200 people, half of whom wanted to watch Reginald Thorne burn alive on national television. Sarah Chen sat between Claudette and Reginald at 8:14 a.m., microphone clipped to her collar, notes spread before her. The feed was going live to 4 million viewers across the country. No delay. No safety net. We're live in 30 seconds, the producer said. Claudette felt Marcus squeeze her hand. He'd insisted on coming, sitting in the front row next to Preston. 2 boys from different worlds, both about to watch their families get torn apart on live TV. Mr. Thorne, Sarah Chen began the moment they went live. 3 weeks ago, You collapsed in a hospital parking garage. Claudette Morrison, a janitor at that hospital, saved your life with CPR. What you didn't know then was that Mrs. Morrison is the widow of Gerald Morrison, one of 400 employees you laid off when you closed Clarkson Manufacturing in December 2010. Gerald Morrison died of alcohol-related liver failure in 2013. How do you respond to that? The studio went silent. Reginald looked directly at the camera. I killed him. Not with my hands, but with my decisions. I closed Clarkson Manufacturing 3 days before Christmas to save $8 million in severance and holiday bonuses. 400 families lost their income. Gerald Morrison lost his purpose, his dignity, and eventually his life. I knew what I was doing. I just didn't care. Gasps rippled through the audience. Sarah Chen's eyebrows shot up. You're admitting this on national television? Yes. For 40 years, I've built my fortune by treating human beings as line items on balance sheets. Factory closures, pension fund raids, strategic bankruptcies. All legal, all profitable, all devastating to real people with real families. I never had to look at their faces, until Claudette Morrison looked at mine while keeping my heart beating with her hands. The camera swung to Claudette. Mrs. Morrison, you recognized this man. The man who destroyed your family, and you still saved his life. Why? Claudette's voice was steady. Because his son was begging me, and that boy didn't deserve to watch his father die. I didn't save Reginald Thorne because he deserved it. I saved him because choosing mercy over revenge is what makes us human. But he killed your husband. He did, and I'll never forgive what he did. But Claudette paused, choosing her words carefully. There's a difference between forgiving past actions and allowing future change. I can hold him accountable for Gerald's death while still believing people can become better than they were. A voice shouted from the audience, "That's garbage. He's a murderer." Security moved toward the speaker, a man in his 60s, weathered face, worn jacket. Wait, Claudette stood up. Let him speak. The man stood, shaking with rage. I'm Jerry Patterson. Worked at Clarkson for 18 years, lost my house, my marriage, everything. Lived in my car for 2 years, and you're telling me I should give this monster a chance to change? After what he did? The audience erupted, more people standing, voices overlapping. My uncle killed himself. We lost everything. Thorne deserves to rot. Sarah Chen tried to regain control, but the fury was too raw, too real. Claudette raised her hands. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not asking you to forget what he did. But if we destroy him without giving him a chance to make things right, then we're just getting revenge, not justice. And revenge doesn't bring Gerald back. It doesn't fix anything. So what does? Jerry Patterson's voice cracked. What fixes 18 years of working my back into dust, just to get thrown away like trash? Reginald stood slowly. Nothing fixes it. There's no amount of money, no apology, no action that repairs what I destroyed. But his voice strengthened. I can stop doing it. I can restructure Thorne Industries to prioritize workers instead of shareholders. I can reopen factories as worker cooperatives. I can fund retraining programs, restore pension funds I raided, invest in communities I gutted. It won't bring back what you lost. But it might prevent the next Gerald Morrison. Empty promises, someone shouted. You're right to doubt me, Reginald said. My word means nothing. My history speaks louder than any promise. But I'm willing to put everything on the line to prove I mean it. How? Sarah Chen leaned forward. This morning, I'm proposing to my board of directors that we convert Thorne Industries to a partial employee ownership model. Workers get 49% equity. I give up majority control. I take a 90% pay cut. Profits get shared with the people who actually create value, not just the executives who exploit them. The studio erupted again, but this time with confusion instead of pure rage. You'll lose billions, Sarah Chen said. Yes, and I'll gain the possibility of redemption. Preston stood up from the audience. Dad, they're going to vote you out anyway. The board meeting is in 90 minutes. You're going to lose everything and get nothing in return. Then I lose everything, Reginald said. But I lose it trying to be better, not fighting to stay the monster I was. Claudette watched father and son stare at each other across the studio, and something shifted in the air. Jerry Patterson spoke again, quieter now. If you're serious, if you really restructure, really give workers ownership, I'll believe it when I see it. But I'll wait to see it before I call for your head. Other voices murmured agreement, not forgiveness, not absolution, but willingness to wait and see. Sarah Chen turned to Claudette. Mrs. Morrison, do you believe he can change? Claudette looked at Reginald, this broken billionaire who'd killed her husband and now wanted redemption he didn't deserve. I don't know, she said honestly, but I believe in giving people the space to try. That's all any of us can ask for. The chance to become better than we were yesterday. The camera held on her face as the studio fell silent, and 4 million people watching at home were forced to ask themselves the same question. Could monsters become human again? Or were some sins simply unforgivable? At 9:47 a.m., they left for the board meeting. The answer was 13 minutes away. The Thorne Industries boardroom occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Renaissance Center, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Detroit, like a castle surveying conquered territory. 12 board members sat around a table worth more than Claudette's house. Reginald stood at the head, looking like a man facing a firing squad. His lawyer had begged him not to do this. His CFO had threatened to resign. His entire executive team had called him insane. He did it anyway. Claudette and Preston sat in visitors' chairs along the wall, unprecedented, but Reginald had insisted. If I'm going to destroy my empire, I want witnesses who'll remember why. Richard Kemper, the board member positioning to replace Reginald, smiled like a shark smelling blood. Shall we begin? I believe we have a health disclosure violation to discuss. We do, Reginald said. I hid my heart condition from this board and our shareholders for 18 months. That's grounds for removal under our bylaws. I'm not contesting it. Shocked silence. However, Reginald continued, before you vote me out, I'm proposing a complete restructuring of how Thorne Industries operates. He clicked a button. The presentation appeared on the massive screen behind him. Effective immediately, I'm proposing we convert 49% of company equity to employee ownership. Every worker, from factory floor to management, gets shares proportional to their tenure and position. Profits get distributed quarterly, 60% to shareholders, 40% split among all employees. That's insane, Kemper interrupted. Our profit margins will drop by approximately 32% in the first year, Reginald said calmly. I've run the numbers. We'll still be profitable, just less obscenely so. Click. Next slide. Second proposal, we reopen Clarkson Manufacturing as a worker cooperative. Initial investment of $50 million, structured so employees own 60%. Thorne Industries retains 40% as minority stakeholder. We provide equipment, training, and contracts to get them started. You want to burn $50 million on a factory we strategically closed. Another board member, Janet Schultz, looked apoplectic. That violates our fiduciary duty to shareholders. Third proposal, Reginald continued as if she hadn't spoken. We establish a $100 million fund to restore pension benefits that were legally but unethically reduced during our bankruptcy restructurings over the past decade. 20,000 former employees will receive what they were originally promised. The room erupted. You're committing corporate suicide. This is breach of fiduciary duty. The shareholders will sue us into oblivion. Kemper stood up, voice cutting through the chaos. Reginald, I understand you had a health crisis. I understand you're feeling mortal. But this isn't penance, it's destruction. You're proposing we voluntarily demolish shareholder value in the name of some misguided redemption fantasy. Yes, Reginald said simply, that's exactly what I'm proposing. Then you've lost your mind, and this board has a legal obligation to remove you before you tank the company. Kemper looked around the table. I motion for an immediate vote on Reginald Thorne's removal as CEO and chairman, effective immediately. Seconded, 3 voices said simultaneously. All in favor? 8 hands went up, only 4 stayed down, the members loyal to Reginald, but even they looked uncertain. Motion carries. Reginald, you're done. Security will escort you from the building. Reginald nodded slowly. I expected that. But before I go, I'm exercising my right as majority shareholder to implement one final executive action. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Reginald, don't. I'm transferring 20% of my personal shares, representing $840 million in current market value, to the Clarkson Community Trust, a new non-profit dedicated to retraining and supporting workers affected by factory closures. The trust will be managed by a board including former Clarkson employees and community leaders. I retain no control over how the funds are used. Dead silence. Claudette's hand flew to her mouth. Preston's eyes went wide. That's... Janet Schultz couldn't finish the sentence. Corporate suicide, Kemper finished, and possibly illegal manipulation of share value. We'll be filing lawsuits within the hour. File whatever you want, Reginald said. I'll be too busy being poor to care. He started gathering his papers. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Kemper leaned forward. You realize you just destroyed yourself for nothing? We're installing new leadership that will reverse every single thing you proposed. The worker equity. Gone. The factory reopening. Cancelled. The pension fund. Not happening. You sacrificed everything and changed nothing. Reginald looked at Claudette. She stood up, moved to his side. He changed himself, she said quietly, and that's worth more than your entire balance sheet. Sentimental garbage, Kemper sneered. In 6 months, Thorne Industries will be more profitable than ever, and Reginald will be just another cautionary tale about mixing emotions with business. Claudette turned to the board. You're probably right. You'll probably undo everything he tried to do. But everyone watching that television interview this morning saw a man choose redemption over power, saw a billionaire give up everything to try making things right. And that story, that example, that's already out in the world. You can't take it back. Reginald walked toward the door, Preston and Claudette flanking him. The security guards looked uncomfortable, unsure if they should actually escort out the man who'd built this empire. Mr. Thorne, one guard said softly, for what it's worth, my dad worked at Clarkson, lost everything, and watching you do this, it won't bring him back, but it means something. In the elevator down 42 floors, the 3 of them stood in silence. Reginald had just lost billions. His company, his legacy, everything he'd spent 40 years building. Preston broke the silence. Dad, are you okay? Reginald looked at his son, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. I'm bankrupt, unemployed, and probably about to be sued by everyone I've ever known. So, not okay? No. A strange expression crossed Reginald's face, something Claudette realized was a genuine smile. I'm better than okay. I'm free. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. Through the glass walls, they could see protesters outside, but also reporters, cameras, people holding signs. One sign read, "Redemption is possible." Another, "Thank you, Claudette Morrison." A third, "Gerald Morrison's legacy lives on." Claudette stepped out into the Detroit morning, Reginald beside her, and realized that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't fix the past, but it gives the future a fighting chance. 1 year after cardiac arrest in a parking garage, Reginald Thorne woke up at 5:30 a.m. in a house worth less than his former wine cellar. No staff, no chef, no driver waiting outside, just him, a coffee maker, and the strange peace that came from having nothing left to lose. He made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and ate alone at a kitchen table that wobbled slightly. The morning news played on a small TV Preston had bought at Target. The anchor was discussing Thorne Industries, now fully controlled by Richard Kemper and the board. Stock prices have rebounded to pre-scandal levels following aggressive cost-cutting measures and the cancellation of former CEO Reginald Thorne's controversial worker equity proposals. Shareholders are calling it a return to fiscal responsibility. Reginald turned off the TV. They'd won. Kemper and the board had systematically dismantled every reform Reginald proposed. The employee ownership model, blocked by shareholder lawsuit. The pension restoration fund, tied up in litigation. The profit-sharing program, deemed financially irresponsible and terminated. Everything he'd sacrificed for, erased in 12 months. Except one thing. The Clarkson Community Trust still stood. $840 million of his personal fortune legally transferred before his removal, untouchable by the board. The money was already working, retraining programs, small business loans, community development projects across 6 states. And next week, Clarkson Manufacturing reopened its doors. Preston stumbled into the kitchen at 6:15, hair messy, wearing his Castech basketball hoodie. "Morning, Dad. You making coffee?" "Already done. Mugs in the cabinet." Preston poured himself a cup, sat down across from his father. They'd developed this routine, quiet mornings together before Preston left for school and Reginald headed to his new job at the Trust's administrative office. "I need to tell you something," Preston said, staring into his coffee. "I got accepted to University of Michigan, full-ride academic scholarship." Reginald's heart swelled. "Preston, that's incredible." "Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm not going." "What?" "I'm taking a gap year, going to work at the Clarkson factory when it opens. Assembly line, entry-level, minimum wage. I want to understand what it's actually like to do the work that built our family's fortune." Preston looked up, defiant, expecting a fight. "I know you probably think it's stupid." "I think it's the smartest thing you've ever said," Reginald interrupted, voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be proud." Preston's eyes widened. "Really?" "Catherine always said I'd never understand the people who worked for me until I worked beside them. I was too arrogant to listen." Reginald reached across the table, gripped his son's shoulder. "You're becoming the man I should have been. Don't ever apologize for that." They sat in silence, drinking coffee, father and son connected in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with respect. At 8 a.m., Reginald drove to Mercy General Hospital, not for medical treatment, for a meeting with Claudette in the cafeteria. They'd started having breakfast together once a week, an unlikely friendship forged in catastrophe. She was already there, still in her scrubs from the night shift, looking exhausted but somehow peaceful. "You look terrible," Reginald said, sitting down. "Night shift does that. 3 codes, 2 emergencies, 1 patient tried to punch a nurse." She sipped her coffee. "Just another Tuesday." "The Trust sent you another offer letter," Reginald said. "Director of Community Outreach, $75,000 salary, full benefits. You'd be working with former factory workers to design programs that actually help." "No." "Claudette?" "I said no, Reginald. Stop asking." She set down her coffee cup with emphasis. "I'm not leaving this job." "Why? You're overqualified. You work yourself into exhaustion for barely enough money to survive. You could do so much more." "I do plenty right here," she cut him off. "Last night I caught a medication error that would have killed a diabetic patient. I comforted a woman whose husband died. I mopped blood off floors so families didn't have to see it. This work matters." "I'm not saying it doesn't." "Yes, you are. You're saying it doesn't matter enough, that I should want more money, more status, more recognition." Claudette leaned forward. "You spent 40 years chasing more, and it turned you into a monster. I've spent 52 years being exactly who I am, and I sleep fine at night." The words stung because they were true. "I just want to help you," Reginald said quietly. "You want to feel less guilty," Claudette corrected. "There's a difference. If I take your money, your position, your help, you get to feel like you fixed something. But Gerald's still dead. My daughter's still gone. And no amount of your charity changes that." Reginald nodded slowly. "You're right. I know I'm right. I'm a 52-year-old black woman who's been invisible her whole life. Being right is all I've got." She softened slightly. "But I don't hate you anymore. That's something." "It's everything," Reginald said. They finished breakfast talking about Marcus, who'd been accepted to 3 universities and was leaning toward Michigan State for their public health program. About Preston's gap year decision. About the Clarkson reopening ceremony next week. "You should come," Reginald said. "To the ceremony. Jerry Patterson specifically asked if you'd be there." "Maybe, if I'm not working." "Claudette, take 1 day off." She smiled, rare but genuine. "I'll think about it." As she stood to leave, Reginald caught her hand. "Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for teaching me what living actually means." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "You've got another 40 years to prove you meant it." Talk to me when you're 80 and you've stayed the course. She walked away, back to her mop and bucket, back to being invisible. And Reginald watched her go, understanding finally that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts. It was measured in how you treated people when nobody was watching, in choosing purpose over profit, in sleeping soundly because your conscience was clear. Claudette Morrison was the richest person he'd ever met. And Reginald Thorne, with his millions and his regrets, was still learning how to be half as wealthy. The factory gates opened at 7 a.m. on a crisp November morning, and Jerry Patterson stood at the entrance of Clarkson Manufacturing for the first time in 15 years. He was 67 now, grey-haired and weathered, but his hands remembered the work. Assembly line supervisor, just like he'd been before Reginald Thorne closed the doors in December 2010 and destroyed 400 lives. Except this time, Jerry owned part of the company. They all did, 75 workers, some former Clarkson employees who'd survived the intervening years, some younger people from the community who'd never had a shot at decent work, gathered in the refurbished factory floor. New equipment gleamed under LED lights. The smell of machine oil and possibility filled the air. Reginald stood in the back of the crowd, deliberately invisible. This wasn't his moment. This was theirs. Jerry stepped up to a microphone, hands shaking slightly. 15 years ago, I stood in this parking lot watching security guards chain these gates. I was 52 years old, 22 years invested in this company, and they gave me 2 weeks severance and a handshake. I lost my house, my marriage, nearly lost my life. The crowd was silent, listening. The man who made that decision is here today, Reginald Thorne. Jerry pointed, every head turned, and I still hate him for what he did. I probably always will. Reginald nodded, accepting it. But, Jerry continued, voice stronger now, that same man gave up his fortune to create the trust that made this possible. He lost billions so we could have this chance. And I don't know if that balances the scales, probably doesn't. But it means something. It means people can change. It means redemption is real. Scattered applause. Not everyone agreed. Some faces remained hard, unforgiving. Today, we reopen Clarkson Manufacturing as a worker cooperative. We own this factory. We share the profits. We make the decisions. Nobody can take this from us because we're not employees, we're owners. Jerry's voice cracked with emotion. Gerald Morrison should be here. Monica Hughes' husband should be here. All the people we lost. They should be standing with us. They're not, and that's on Thorne. But we're here. And we're building something they'd be proud of. The applause was stronger this time. Claudette stood next to Marcus in the crowd, tears streaming down her face. Marcus squeezed her hand. Grandpa would have loved this, he whispered. Yes, he would have. After the ceremony, people toured the factory floor, tested equipment, planned production schedules. The first contracts were already signed. Automotive parts for 3 Michigan suppliers, enough work to keep them busy for 6 months at least. Preston worked alongside the training crew, learning how to operate a CNC machine. He wore safety goggles and steel-toed boots, his expensive boarding school wardrobe replaced by work clothes from the uniform shop. He looked happier than Reginald had ever seen him. Your boy's a natural, Jerry told Reginald, watching Preston adjust settings on a lathe. Asks good questions. Doesn't act like he's better than anyone. You raised him right. I didn't, Reginald admitted. His mother did, and Claudette Morrison finished the job. I just stopped getting in the way. Jerry studied him. You really gave up billions for this? For this and about 60 other projects across 6 states. Retraining programs, small business loans, community health centers, education funds. Reginald shrugged. Turns out you can do a lot of good when you stop hoarding money like a dragon. You could have kept it all, kept the power. Nobody forced you. Claudette Morrison forced me, by choosing mercy when she should have chosen revenge, by showing me what human decency actually looks like. Reginald watched his son laughing with the other workers. I spent 40 years taking from people. Figured I'd spend whatever time I have left giving back. Jerry extended his hand. Still hate you, but I respect what you're doing. Reginald shook it. That's fair. Across the factory floor, Marcus approached Claudette with an envelope. Gram, it came today. She opened it, read the letter, and her knees nearly buckled. Michigan State University, full scholarship for pre-med, plus a stipend from the Clarkson Community Trust covering housing and living expenses for 4 years. I'm going to medical school, Marcus said, voice shaking with disbelief. I'm actually going to be a doctor. Claudette pulled him into a hug, sobbing. Your mama would be so proud. Your grandpa, oh baby, Gerald would be over the moon. I'm going to specialize in community medicine, Marcus said. Work in places like this, neighborhoods like ours. Help people who can't afford fancy doctors. Just like your grandmother, Reginald said, approaching them, seeing people everyone else ignores. Marcus looked at this man, the billionaire who'd killed his grandfather but funded his future, and struggled with the complexity of it all. I don't know how to feel about you, Mr. Thorne. That's okay. I don't know how to feel about me either. Reginald smiled sadly. But I hope someday you'll look at what came from that parking garage moment, this factory, your education, your future, and think maybe mercy creates possibilities revenge never could. Marcus considered this. My grandpa used to say people aren't all good or all bad. They're just people making choices every day about who they want to be. Gerald was a wise man. I wish I'd known that before I destroyed him. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. Me too. The factory hummed with activity, machines starting up, workers calling to each other, the sound of productivity, of purpose, of second chances. Preston jogged over, face flushed with excitement. Dad, Jerry says I can work full-time during my gap year, learn every station, every process. He thinks I could be good at this. You will be, Reginald said, because you're doing it to understand, not to exploit. As the sun set over Detroit, Claudette stood in the parking lot where she'd once found Reginald dying, the same concrete, the same cold air. But everything else had changed. One act of mercy, keeping her hands moving on a dying man's chest when everything in her screamed to stop, had rippled outward in ways she never imagined. A factory reopened, 75 families employed, her grandson going to medical school, a billionaire learning to be human. A boy becoming a man who valued dignity over dollars. Gerald's death hadn't been meaningless after all. His ghost had haunted Reginald Thorne into redemption, and from that redemption, hope had grown. Thank you, Gerald, she whispered to the wind. Your life mattered. More than he ever knew, more than I ever told you. Marcus and Preston stood beside her, two boys from different worlds, united by tragedy and transformation. You ready, Gram? Marcus asked. Yeah, baby, let's go home. They walked to Claudette's old Honda, still running, still reliable, still enough. And Claudette Morrison, 53-year-old hospital janitor, grandmother, lifesaver, went home to her duplex knowing she'd changed the world, not with money or power or fame, but with mercy. And that was everything. 5 years after a billionaire collapsed in a parking garage, Claudette Morrison stood in front of 20 new hospital employees, teaching them what nobody had ever taught her. This is heparin, 10,000 units per milliliter, she said, holding up a vial. This is heparin, 1,000 units per milliliter. They look identical. But if you grab the wrong one, your patient dies. I've caught this mistake 7 times in 28 years. 7 people are alive because I pay attention. The room was silent. Nurses, residents, even 2 attending physicians sat listening to a janitor explain how to save lives. Dr. Patricia Chen, now chief of medicine, stood in the back watching with satisfaction. 3 years ago, I proposed we formalize Claudette's role. The administration laughed at me, said we couldn't have a janitor teaching medical staff. Then the Detroit Free Press wrote that feature, The Invisible Expert, How a Hospital Janitor Knows More Than Most Doctors, and suddenly everyone wanted her wisdom. Claudette finished her presentation, answered questions, then grabbed her cleaning cart. Teaching was Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest of the time, she still mopped floors. Why won't you accept the full-time educator position? Dr. Chen asked, walking alongside her. 80,000 salary, benefits, your own office. Because I like mopping, Claudette said simply. It's honest work. Plus, I see things from down here that I'd miss from an office. Last week, I noticed a patient's color changing during my 3 a.m. rounds. Called the nurse, Saved his life. Would have missed that if I was sitting at a desk. Dr. Chen shook her head, smiling. You're impossible. I'm consistent. There's a difference. At noon, Claudette met Reginald at their usual spot, the hospital cafeteria, where this unlikely friendship had somehow become routine. He looked healthier than he had in years. 73 now, white-haired, dressed in casual clothes from Costco. His net worth had stabilized around $200 million after legal settlements, but he lived on roughly $60,000 a year, teaching himself what regular people already knew about budgeting. Preston called this morning, Reginald said, stirring his coffee. He got promoted to production manager at Clarkson, 22 years old, running a manufacturing floor. Gerald was 24 when he made supervisor, Claudette said. Preston's following a good path. He wants to expand, open a second location, hire 50 more workers. He's meeting with the trust board next week to pitch it. Without you? Without me. I'm just another stakeholder now. The trust is independent, exactly like it should be. Reginald smiled. He doesn't need his father's influence. He's earned this himself. They ate in comfortable silence. This friendship still surprised people, the billionaire and the janitor, meeting weekly, talking about everything and nothing. The media had tried to make it a story. Claudette had refused all interviews. Marcus graduates medical school next year, Claudette said. Top of his class. Already has residency offers from Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins. Where's he leaning? Detroit Receiving, trauma medicine. Says he wants to work where he's needed most, not where the prestige is highest. Her voice swelled with pride. That boy understands what matters. You taught him that. I tried. The world keeps teaching the opposite. Reginald's phone buzzed, a reminder about his 2 p.m. commitment, speaking at Wayne State University's business ethics class. He'd been doing this for 3 years now, telling students the truth about what ruthless capitalism actually costs. I should go, he said, standing. Same time next week? If I'm not working. Claudette, you're always working. Exactly. He left, and she finished her lunch alone, watching the hospital move around her. Still invisible to most people. Still okay with that. At 5:30 p.m., near the end of her shift, Claudette found a young woman crying in a supply closet. She was maybe 22, wearing janitor scrubs, her name tag reading Destiny Williams. Fresh out of somewhere hard, Claudette could tell, that look of someone who'd survived things that should have broken them. What's wrong, baby? Claudette asked gently. Destiny wiped her eyes quickly. Nothing. I'm fine. You're crying in a closet. That's not fine. The girl's defenses crumbled. I thought this job would be different. Nobody sees me. Doctors walk past like I'm furniture. I clean up blood and vomit, and nobody says thank you. My mama said I was wasting my life, that I should have stayed in school, and maybe she's right. Claudette sat down beside her on an upturned bucket. How old are you? 23. I was 19 when I started here, 28 years ago. You know what I learned? Destiny shook her head. Being invisible is a superpower. We see everything because nobody thinks to hide things from us. We hear conversations, we notice patterns. We catch mistakes that kill people. Claudette took the girl's hand. This job isn't wasting your life. It's teaching you how the world actually works, from the bottom up, where truth lives. But I wanted to be a nurse, maybe a doctor, not a janitor. So be a doctor. But learn from this first. Every doctor who's worth anything understands that the person mopping the floor might know more about patient care than the resident who thinks they're God. Claudette smiled. 5 years from now, when you're in medical school, and you will be if you want it, you'll understand that these years taught you more than any textbook. You really think I could go to medical school? I know you could. My grandson just finished his 3rd year, started exactly where you are, broke, overlooked, doubting himself. But he paid attention, he learned. He never forgot where he came from. Destiny wiped her eyes. Why are you being nice to me? Because 28 years ago, I was crying in a closet just like this, and a nurse named Barbara stopped to tell me I mattered. She's dead now. Cancer took her in 2003. But her words kept me going through every hard day since. Claudette stood up. That's how it works. Someone lifts you up, then you lift up the next person. That's legacy. What happened to you? Destiny asked. After 28 years, did you become something more? Claudette smiled. I became exactly who I was meant to be, a woman who sees people everyone else ignores. A grandmother who raised a doctor. A person who saved a man's life and changed how an entire company treats workers. I did all that while mopping floors. She grabbed her cart, started to leave, then turned back. You matter, Destiny Williams. Don't let anyone, not doctors, not your family, not your own doubt, tell you otherwise. You matter because you show up, you work hard, and you care. That's everything. Destiny stood up straighter. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just remember this moment when you're successful someday. Find someone crying in a closet and tell them they matter. That's how we change the world, one person at a time, lifting each other up. Claudette finished her shift, clocked out at 6 a.m. and walked through the parking garage where it all began. The same concrete, the same cold air. But she wasn't the same woman who'd saved Reginald Thorne 5 years ago. She was stronger, wiser, more certain that mercy mattered more than revenge, that purpose trumped power, that how we treat people when nobody's watching defines our entire life. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Love you, Graham. Couldn't have done any of this without you. She smiled, texted back. You did it yourself, baby. I just believed in you. But that wasn't quite true. Belief was everything. When nobody else saw value, when the world said you didn't matter, when poverty and prejudice tried to make you invisible, having someone believe in you could change everything. Claudette Morrison had spent 57 years being invisible, but the people she'd lifted up, they saw her clearly, and that was the only legacy that mattered. She drove home as the sun rose over Detroit, this broken, beautiful city that kept surviving against all odds, just like her. And Claudette understood finally, we don't measure a life by what we accumulate. We measure it by who we become and who we help others become. Everything else is just noise.